to cool down.
That's amazing. Well, we start our big program here, and of course, being in the vortex, I'm doing this on location. We have Dan Perkins with us today. He, of course, is a best-selling author, Dan Perkins Media. We also have Frank Fernuccio, USA Gov Policy. Tim Rivers with us today. He's going to be with us here in just a few moments as well. So, Frank, start us off here. What is the latest news that you, me, and Dan and Tim need to be speaking about?
Well, the fascinating thing is about the tariffs. The president just concluded a tariff deal with the EU, with the UK, with Japan, and so forth, and it has sent the market soaring. There's consumer confidence to a greater level. And this proves that every economic forecaster who went on CNBC or MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS was dead wrong. You know, if you go up to about the early part of the 20th century, the great lion's share of income that the United States government took in wasn't from those income taxes, it was from tariffs. And it looks as though we might be on the way to doing that one more time again. Despite all of that, despite the obvious inequity of having the United States products basically kicked out of Europe and Japan and places like that, or made to face tariff barriers, that was wrong. President Trump merely leveled the playing field. And yet, all the economists that we've seen on those major networks, they were talking against it as though it was something terrible, that it was going to wreck the world economy. It's a major revolution in both the economy of the United States and the global economy. Of course, those globalists are going to be hiding under their beds for a while because they've been proven so wrong for so long.
Dan, start us off here, my friend.
So I agree with what Frank is saying. This is not terribly newsworthy, but as a follow-up, but just as a representation. Yesterday morning on CNBC, their morning market show, Jim Cramer is on. And the first time in his broadcast career, when he was talking about Trump and the economy and the tariffs, and this is a live show, okay? He dropped the F-bomb on a program that's not necessarily targeted to children, but I saw that as an example of how the Democrats have really pushed very hard in all of their media relations to become more vulgar and aggressive in their talk and what they're saying. And as a result, they find themselves in a situation where they think that it's going to help them with the male vote, and it's not. We had numbers that came out yesterday that the Democratic approval rating in Congress was at the lowest it's been in 35 years. And yet they're talking about winning the midterm election and taking back control of the Senate. They're smoking some kind of an illegal drug, because I don't know what's driving them. And they have a situation where, as Frank pointed out so well, the quick response. And I did a show with IQ about the time that all the discussion was going on with the tariffs, and the markets were crashing. And I said to people on many shows that, look, don't pay attention to the emotion in the market. Look at the fundamentals. And this is not the time to sell when it's down 19%. Americans notoriously do that. They buy high and they sell low. But I encourage people to just sit tight and let things play out. The Democrats are making decisions and judgments on a short-term basis without having all the facts or analyzing what's there. They're just following a script that somebody's written for them, that the world's going to come to an end. And when it didn't, as Frank pointed out so well, every time they screw up and get something wrong, it further destroys their credibility as legitimate. And I think that the recovery, those people who stayed the course and kept their portfolios intact, have seen record new highs in the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, and the Dow Jones is right behind it. So the money's there, the opportunity's there, and I think, Frank, most people don't know what you said, that for the longest time before I think it was, and I could be wrong, but you may be better than I think it was 1913 when we introduced the federal income tax, or sometime around there. Prior to that, the whole way the government was financed was on tariffs, and we're going back to it, and we had a surplus at the end of the second quarter, a surplus in our budget, and income exceeded outgo, and so as these things, I mean, Europe's the third largest economy in the world, and this morning I heard, Frank, that, and you may have heard, that trade discussions that are going on with China is becoming very interested in wanting to do something about the tariff, because they've got many ships sitting in various harbors. They're not sailing not only to the United States, but to other countries around the world. So the Democrats have really screwed themselves because they think they're so smart. But I heard one thing, Frank, that maybe you didn't hear today. And it was, I believe it was Pew Research came out today and said that the Democratic Party is now the party of white liberal women. That's what they are. They're no longer a male and female. The females, the white radical women, have control of the Democratic Party, and they're never going to let up on beating on men. And as long as they continue to do that, they're going to continue to start to lose more and more elections, because white racism is in the hands of white females in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's why AOC and Jasmine Crockett are really the face of the Democrat Party. Well said, Dan.
Yeah, that's true.
So, IQ, what do you have for all this?
Listen, why is everybody lamenting the condition of the Democrats? I love it. They're self-destructing. And this is exactly what we should hope for. So by 2026, there will be an absolute majority in both houses Republican. Let them commit suicide. Why are we complaining about it? They're stupid. You know they're stupid. They're criminal. You know they are criminal. And you are right. They're being run by middle-aged, white, liberal females. They are the ones who demonstrate against ICE. Almost invariably, middle-aged, they have no children, they have no husband, they have no boyfriend, frustrated women. Don't take my word for it. It's on YouTube 24 hours a day. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they might have girlfriends instead of boyfriends. But it's, yeah, it's an issue, and I think that what we're seeing is we're not creating all the pushback from the I don't believe from the Democrats. The Democrats are doing it to themselves. They're opening their mouths and putting themselves in situations that make no sense, and it's because, and I heard this yesterday, and I think it's a great description. What Donald Trump is doing is protecting the American people, not Republicans or Democrats, the American people. The example came out yesterday. Under the Biden administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, they felt that we needed a new gas can. So they put out the specifications for a new gasoline gas can, and they started selling them and telling everybody they had to get rid of their old plastic ones. And the guys who designed the gas can didn't put a vent in the gas can. So what happened is they started blowing up. And Donald Trump issued an executive order, I think yesterday, which said, okay, those Obama gas cans, they're gone. We're going back to what worked. That was plastic gas cans. don't use the other ones because they're dangerous, they can kill you. These are just simple examples of what he's trying to do to say to the American people, I'm on your side. He's trying to make things better for the American people with jobs, expanding economy, more wages, all these things, and bringing imports in at a fairer price, and also at the same time presenting an opportunity for exporting. So he's becoming a president of the people, which is driving the Democrats absolutely nuts. I don't know whether you saw it over the weekend, Frank, but Chris Matthews was being interviewed by Charlie Rose. And he said, I got to admit, the man knows how to get people motivated and get things done. And he's working for the American people. So this is a guy who was absolutely against Donald Trump from the very beginning, has now turned his colors to being a recognition that he's going to be, he is a great president.
Yeah, and he was joined also to some extent by Bill Maher, a liberal commentator, who just admitted that he was pretty much wrong about tariffs. Bill Maher said, I thought this was going to be a disaster. It's obviously not. It's doing great. This is really should be seen in context of two of the key figures of the Trump administration. Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat congresswoman and former Democrat candidate for president. And of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., almost an iconic Democrat. The fact that these folks are now pretty much within the mainstream of the Trump administration indicates the big transition that has gone on. And as IQ mentioned previously, the Democratic Party is dwindling down to a small nugget of extreme radicals representing a very tiny proportion of the American population. The only thing the Democrats have going for them at this point is that sort of nostalgia, brand loyalty that a number of people still have to the Democrat Party name. They have soft, rosy images of FDR or JFK, but that party doesn't exist anymore. And as the facts become more and more clear, as the overwhelming evidence that this Democratic Party is not that Democratic Party, you're going to see more and more people ditch that brand loyalty and vote on the candidate, not on the party.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that I can't believe that there aren't people, Democratic leaders in the back room who are not discussing, are we going the right direction here? Because if we continue to get lower and lower approval ratings in Congress, how in the hell are we ever going to take over the House and the Senate? Because we're Democrats? I don't think so. So they're either living in a false dream that's going to turn into a nightmare after the midterm elections, if they lose things as it's possible for them to do. What's the future of the Democratic Party? And
the only thing they have going for them is the fact there are certain areas of the country, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, areas of California, you could put Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler on the Democrat line, and folks would vote for it simply because it is the Democrat line.
They're voting for it because it's a D after their name.
Exactly.
They're voting for the D, not the person.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think in California, as things have gotten really bad in California with the fires and everything else, and the huge deficits in the government, Gavin Newsom, I don't think is viable to be a candidate for the president in 2028. He's got too much baggage and too much opportunities that he's given in the media to create all kinds of campaign commercials against him. So I don't see him. So I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know who's going to represent the Democratic Party. But if I had to guess, Frank, another woman.
Well, Dan, maybe perhaps you and those of us on the show today should make our fortunes for the next campaign, printing up bumper slogans that say, "Make America like California, vote Democrat," and selling them to the Republican candidate.
Right. It's amazing. And the shooting yesterday in New York City on Park Avenue. I mean, that's not the Bronx. That's not Brooklyn. It's not in a subway. It's in the high rent district, in a hotel, in an office building that has the NFL and Blackstone and a bunch of other businesses, and there were 5 people killed.
And
Just
Dan, one of the stories that's not being covered much in New York is that once again we had a bodega owner, a small store owner, defend himself from a criminal, and the DA, Alvin Bragg, one of the most progressive people in the country, wants to go after the store owner for defending himself rather than after the criminal who perpetrated the crime.
right. It's just somebody was saying recently, why don't we just build a wall around New York City and forget about it?
Because I live in New York City, Dan, that's why.
So let me ask you a question. If you live in New York City, is there a point in time that the environment would change that you'd say, okay, enough, I'm leaving?
It's getting to that point, certainly with Mondami talking about abolishing private property rights and abolishing the New York City Police Department. New York City would become unviable, unlivable. And that would be a certain point in time and you'd have to change.
Well, I think that from what I've been reading, there are people who are, especially in the real estate markets, prices have really gone south, and people are, if they're commercial businesses, they're looking to move to Florida or some other place where there are more favorable tax situations, because if this guy gets in, and I think, and you being a New Yorker might have an opinion on this, and that is it possible that he's already peaked even before the election? I mean, he
Well,
came in.
the problem is a similar problem in California, but in a different way. New York City has adopted this ranked choice voting scheme so that a minor candidate, what should be a minor candidate, can sneak in. Remember in the Democratic primary, you had a couple of candidates that also were running. He just happened to get more than those other 2 candidates. If it was a one-on-one election, say Mayor Adams against Mondami, if it was Cuomo versus Mondami, despite the unfavorables of both those candidates, Mondami wouldn't stand a chance. The reason I say it's similar to California, California adopted the ballot harvesting scheme, in which party bosses can collect these ballots so that, in essence, no Democrat will ever not have a vote cast for them, one way or the other. If we look at that, we combine the fact that Democrats have opposed voter ID, they've opposed modernizing and upgrading the voter registration rolls. These schemes that they have perpetuated on the American people over the past couple of decades always open up a path for fringe candidates or failed candidates, failed incumbents even, to take office. That's a real problem that has to be faced.
Yeah, I have one side issue that I want.
Yes.
There was a story that came out yesterday that Pete Buttigieg, when he was in charge of transportation, spent let me say that again, $83 billion on DEI and practically nothing for new equipment for the airports. 83 billion on DEI and practically nothing for the airports. Outrageous, absolutely outrageous.
It's similar to what happened in New York under Mayor de Blasio a couple of years ago. Mayor de Blasio's wife was given a portfolio of about $80 million. And the purpose of it was to help the homeless, to do all this sort of thing. No one can find any trace of that money being spent on that cause. And no one can also find any trace of where the money went.
Right. It disappeared. Democrats are good magicians. They can make money disappear better than anybody else in the world. And they've got schemes to go through layers, to wash it through layers to keep making it more and more difficult to find what's going on. And I find it amazing that we're getting more and more information. And I had a conversation actually two conversations yesterday on my show with lawyers, Frank, and I asked each of them different questions. The second one was my constitutional guy, and I sent him a question last week, and I said, so Barack Obama appears, from what we've seen so far from Tulsi, is that he refused the briefing, and he wanted the Steele dossier put in it, and he released it, and it was false. And I raised the question: will he have immunity for his activity in the false narrative that he was responsible for requesting and having his four national security operations created? And the first attorney said he probably cannot be. He has immunity on that. But I said, what happens on the 20th of January when he leaves office, but he continues to work in support of the story and is providing encouragement and maybe arranging financial support? He said, now you have a different story, because he's no longer president. There are some people would say that they would tie the two together, but other people would say, no, once he leaves the office, he no longer has immunity on things that he does after he's left the office. But what he said to me, I thought was interesting. That's such a great question. I think it's going to be talked about in the law schools in this country for a long time.
Well, there's one other issue too. Generally, an elected official or even an appointed official has immunity for things that were done that he could be prosecuted for if it was in the official course of his duties. Now, an argument can be made that if President Obama made a terrible mistake, which he made several of, and got people killed, say in a foreign adventure, or something that lost the taxpayers' money, he probably is immune from that. But is getting involved in the political campaign in the official course of his duties? And you can make an argument that that's not in the official course of his duties, and he might not be immune because of that. Then you come up with the second issue, which is statute of limitations. Now, there are statute of limitations that do apply. However, if you can prove that this was a conspiracy and there was a conspiracy to hide those actions, that would toll the statute of limitations.
Mm-hmm. I heard that last week from John, that the statute of limitations, if he used it, you killed somebody, you buried the body, but you didn't tell anybody, and you think you're safe after the statute of limitations, and he says, no, you're not safe because you know where the body is and you didn't say anything, so the clock continues to run. And so that's what he was saying, that some of these situations, the statute of limitations may have run out, as you point out. However, if there's still a conspiracy going on and they're still trying to push that narrative, then the clock starts over again. And so all of them, John said that he thought that the greatest crime of all of this was the fact that Barack Obama weaponized 4 departments of the government specifically to get rid of a candidate that he wasn't running against.
Let me give you one other example of how the government was weaponized. During the Obama administration, I was assisting some private organization, not for profit, to get a 501c3. And the name of the organization was very conservative oriented, never got through. Lois Lerner, I guess, was the one who put the kibosh on that. Well, I tried something different. I took back the paperwork and I changed the name of the organization from conservative something or other to Community Action Civic Association. Very non-political sounding. Didn't change a word in the charter, didn't change a word in the description, just changed the name. Within a week or so, they got their certification as a 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how completely weaponized, completely politicized the Obama administration was. President Obama, just like President Biden, was not president of the United States. He was president of the Democratic Party and conducted himself as such.
Right. Good point.
Well, as we wrap up here, let's start with Frank Vernuccio. Frank, how do we get your radio program, TV show, everything?
Well, if you don't have it on your local station, there are 13 stations around the country that cover it. But if you don't have it on one of those stations, go to usagovpolicy.com and there's a link to the show there, as well as our weekly research columns.
Fantastic. Well, Frank, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it, sir.
Great agreeing with you. Take care, guys.
Definitely.
care.
We'll see you next week, Frank. Frank Vernuccio
You bet.
joins us at the top of the hour each and every week. We now go to our next guest. Tim Rivers is with us. Tim, if you want to unmute there you go on the old Zoom. The Zoom. We've got Dan Perkins. We've got IQ Hours Only. So Tim, bring us up to speed on some of your latest projects. And I know that IQ and Dan will have some questions for you here in a few.
Well, boy, I don't know where to start. It was the last time I seen you guys about a year ago, and we were talking about the beginning of book number 2 going to press.
Yes.
That was The Art of Confinement, and that was a pretty significant book in that you kind of begin to see almost all the J6ers in there begin to realize they were pawns. This wasn't really about anything they had ever done. It was more about being pawns in this political game, and you see that in their letters. And then this third book closes the doors because it's called The Road to Freedom, and it literally runs right up to January 20th, the day that we're waiting outside the prisons for them. Here in Coleman, I was a Freedom Ambassador for Florida. We were at Coleman Prison in North Florida. We had about 30 people on the roadbed waiting till almost 1 a.m. before they allowed a few of us into the prison grounds to release these people. Just an amazing event, but I don't think anybody really, I still see the cognitive dissonance. I still see the Democrats often parroting, well, all those police officers that you killed that day. And, it seems to me that the narrative remains in place for many of the left, and certainly for mainstream media, although they have a lot of tongue in cheek about the way they report now because they realize how bald-faced the lie looks after so much time and so many revelations. So where are we? Well, book 3 is on its way to the printer. It's done. It's an amazing piece of work because not only do we do the last year of letters, art, and testimonies from the people directly from prison. So you're reading this in first person through their letters. You'll see the letters. You see the art. It's an amazing presentation from people who are basically being persecuted by their government. I think we owe a lot of our history to journals, letters, things that were discovered in grandma's attic from the Nazi war. A lot of history comes to us in this form, in these first-person testimonies of letters and journals. And I think these 3 books form a journal of a period in time where we almost lost the republic. And these people who were surrogates for liberty for us, for you and I, who didn't go to jail, who didn't get indicted, didn't have our lives destroyed, didn't have our bank accounts drained, our reputations ruined. They were the surrogates for liberty for us because we enjoy this liberty now, mostly because of so much has been revealed over the last year that I think slowly, even though so many people still believe the lies, the narrative turned to this is ridiculous. Nobody shows up to overthrow a government with a MAGA hat and a flag. You bring guns and cannons. These testimonies are part of history, and I guess that leads me to this next conversation. What happens to history? How much of history do we really know? Can we really vet? Because history we know is written by the winners, right? Those who succeed are the ones who are left around to write the books. And so my concern, and the concern of many of the J6 advocates in the field, is what happens to this history? What happens to all the video that really has never been released? What happens to the thousands and thousands of hours of individual videos from cell phones, and pictures, images? How about discovery that almost 1,500 defendants had access to? What happens to that? What happens to the court records? What happens to those that have been sealed by the court because of the infamy of what the judges and the prosecutors were doing, could never see the light of day and survive public opinion? What happens to that history if we do not preserve it? it will disappear. And the narrative can be rewritten any way they want. And so that's what we're up to now, is the National J6 Historical Archive Project. This is basically an attempt to, without government backing, without government intervention, and without government management, to create an independent public archive of all of this data that I just mentioned: court records, discovery videos, everything you can think of that has been J6 related, right down to the lives of the J6 committee, need to be immortalized in a way that a future generation that is not politicized the way ours has been, how we're divided as a country, that maybe in the future there's a chance to fairly gauge history if only the evidence will survive. And so this is the J6 National Archive Project. It is an American project. It's not a government project. It's not a my project. It's not a nonprofit project. It is you, the people of America, helping us fund a national storage space to begin collecting this data in the first year. In the second year, we will make this available to the public with research tools so that people can understand through direct interaction with real factual data, not media narrative, not lies of a J6 committee, not altered video with fake background audio. We will give you the real thing, and then let the public and future generations make their own decisions about what this was about and how people were treated and how close we came to losing the republic. That's a big project. You can help us really fast. GiveSendGo.com, a fantastic organization that has never turned away Christian or conservative advocates despite other funding sources shutting us down and taking our monies. GiveSendGo.com/J6 Archive Project. Real easy. J6 Archive Project. Send me a quarter, send me $1, send me 50, send me 50,000. I need 100 grand to have a space big enough to put all of this data. We're talking petabytes of data. Petabytes of data. So that's what we're up to right now, is preserving that. The books are part of that. The books are part of history. That's why we wrote them, so that this stuff could never disappear forever. And I believe the Archive Project will seal the deal in taking this to an entirely new level and giving you all of the information, and let the future and the public and academic researchers tell us what really happened.
Well, let's start out with Dan. Dan, that was a lot. What do you have for Tim?
I have a lot for Tim. Tim, I did an interview with Jake, who was in the jail in Washington, D.C. for 3 years in solitary confinement. And I did it on the prison phone, where every 12 or 15 minutes he had to hang up and start over again. And I happened to be just listening to that broadcast over the weekend. And if it's of any value to you, I'd be happy to send you a copy of that for your archives. I wonder about one of the areas that I have the greatest amount of concern is the fact that the J6 committee, the Democrats on the committee, decide to destroy the evidence. And I'm wondering if there's been any discussion or investigation as to, can any of that evidence that was not passed over to the next administration, which is the prerogative of requirement when you change administrations and you have a standing committee, you turn over all of your evidence to the new committee, but they didn't do that. I'm curious as to whether or not Mr. Trump can do anything to use the power of the government, perhaps the FBI and the Justice Department, investigate what happened to the material and see if any of it is available, because we obviously know that there was a lot of stuff that was hidden by the Biden administration and the Obama administration that Gabbard has brought to the attention of the American people, which is really quite shocking and revealing about how the government operated. But it seems to me it is, as I was saying a few minutes ago, this attorney that I was talking to, interviewing yesterday, was saying that the major crime is how the Democratic Party had weaponized 4 agencies of the government, primarily national security agencies, to deal with not only the January 6th, but the Steele dossier, and to circumvent the rules and the laws of the United States for a purpose that was not in the best interest of the American people.
I think you have to look at something, turnabout seems to be fair play at times, right? What happened with the January Sixers is that the DOJ took control of a law that was put together for Enron, actually, that had talked about once you're under investigation, once an official federal investigation has been opened and you know about it, if you destroy records or you try to hide them or anything of that nature or alter them, you're interfering with an official investigation. That's called the obstruction of an official proceeding, 1512C, that carries a 20-year felony sentence with it. And that's what they used to beat most January 6ers into submission, threatening them with that in exchange for taking pleas of lesser crimes. And then in many cases, those who stood firm were actually charged with that. And it took the efforts of a number of advocates, including Trennis Evans and Condemned USA and a number of incredible attorneys, to overturn that, to present the case to the Supreme Court, to overturn the fact that 1512C did not apply to January 6th. But you know what it does apply to? The official investigation of the January 6th Select Committee. If you destroyed records and you knew there was an investigation and it had been opened, as the committee indicated they had, then you violated 1512C. And it doesn't matter if I can find the records, if I can prove you destroyed them, you're guilty. I'm wondering if turnabout seems fair play to the American public.
Well, I was listening to what you were saying there, and I'm thinking about Hillary. She was under a subpoena from the Congress, and she destroyed tens of thousands of emails under a subpoena and was never charged with anything.
I don't know if how far the statute runs on that, but it certainly would not have run out on the January 6th, the elements of the January 6th committee. And I think there's a general feeling that there's traitors, not only to the party, but to the nation who participated in that. And by traitors, I mean you committed treasonous acts. You acted against the best interests of the country and against the security of the nation and against the trust of the public. I think that if I want to count up the injuries from January 6th, I look at the lives destroyed, the families broken apart, the bankruptcies, the businesses lost, the reputations destroyed. You know what? It absolutely pales between that and the loss of trust in our system of justice. That was the true damage from January 6th. And I'm not sure we can undo that unless we see justice being done. And I believe those people should be brought to justice. And I believe it should, if we can't find them guilty, we should at very least find them censored and remove them from ever serving in public office again. And that's a personal opinion.
You have a situation where January 6th is one example, it's a terrible example, but one example of how the collusion between the Democratic Party and the news media created an event that wasn't there. And when Nancy Pelosi said there was an insurrection, the news media picked it up. And as you said, you don't go to an insurrection with flags and hats. And the idea that there was ever a potential insurrection, but they convinced the American people by hammering it day after day after day that this was an attack upon the government and our government principles. And we're seeing that in today. We've got the Democrats again, as we talked earlier. The Democrats were the ones who were screaming and yelling about the tariffs and the world's going to come to an end and we're going to be in recession by the 4th of July and people are going to lose their fortunes and their houses and everything else. And the news media jumped on that and just followed it and hammered it, and it didn't happen. You know, and I wonder how many times can the little boy cry wolf when the people will no longer respond? How many times can the Democrats mislead the American public when the American public ultimately says no more?
I listened to you guys earlier. I can't argue that the Democratic Party has lost their moral ground completely, and their approval rating is down in the 20s somewhere. There was 27. I think it's been down to 23 as a low spot. Um, and the young people are demanding a rebranding of the party. Young Democrats don't want that image to be sticking to them. And I think I'm not sure you can rebrand something that's been this badly damaged. Um, but there's a future where they are not gone. It's called 2026 and 2028. Uh, there's a future where these people are still around with their votes and their ideas of socialism. There's a future where even the dissatisfied can't seem to grasp reality because they must vote for D because their dad voted for D and their granddad voted for D. And by God, how can you break that tradition? There's a laziness to the body politic of America. We don't do our jobs. We don't thoroughly investigate who we place in power over us at the local level. So how in the world can we even fathom what's happening at a level that's 1,200 or 2,000 miles away from us?
Right.
Do we research it? Do we really know who we vote for? Does anybody really do their groundwork? How many people raised your hand? How many people voted for judges because you remembered their name and you didn't look at their rulings? That's the lazy America. That's the boomer generation. We took our eyes off the ball. Mea culpa. We should have been more involved. We should have done a better job of selecting our leaders. We should have investigated and not just been damn lazy and voted the party. And I think the future will depend on us voting for the man, not the party. So I agree with you guys on that respect.
So I just want to follow up what you were just saying, because I think it was very important. Is that we also abdicated the education of our children to liberals who do not believe anything that we believe, and they're going to teach our children whatever they want to teach them, and most of the time it isn't reading, writing, and arithmetic. But I do think that there are more and more Americans who are reacting to that and are saying no more.
I would agree with you. I raised two children through the 90s, and I got to say that my wife and I were appalled. Both of my parents were educators. I was appalled to see what was happening to the system, the pods, the multifunction people. You have parents in there actually having to provide materials and daycare for the kids. It was just crazy, a complete loss of focus in how we educated our younger people. And then DEI comes along. I can't even explain that one. I'm sorry. That was just perverted. My father taught history in the 70s and the 60s, and there was a requirement to graduate high school in Florida that you had to take a course called Problems of American Democracy. And what it really was Americanism versus socialism or communism. And it cleanly defined those two architectures of politics and socials, what the social impacts of those two thought processes of government were. And Americans came out of high school knowing the difference. Today, they seem to think socialism is like, the Sunday picnic where everybody gets ice cream and everyone's happy and no one cares what anybody else does. And that, my friend, is not reality. And so the destruction of the Department of Education has my wholehearted support. Give it back to the states where we have the authorities and, by the way, the moral obligations, because states are basically encapsulated countries. We have our own constitutions. We have our own desires for how our state is run, our own priorities of what we want to preserve and what we want to protect. Florida's no different. So I think really you're looking at a brave new world if we can save it before 26 and 28. If we can turn that tide of angry Democrats who are just wanting to rebrand the same old, you can't put lipstick on this pig. I'm sorry. It's just horrible. But can you convert them to Republicans? Can you convert them to conservatives? Can you convert them to moral Americans? That is the bigger question.
So
Well, and
Tim, I have to jump on something that you said a second ago. This is probably going to create all sorts of problems. I'm not trying to create problems. Believe me. But you mentioned the thing about socialism. One of the things that I've been trying to figure this out with Dan and IQ and every guest that we ever have on this show. How exactly can we explain to younger people that there is a middle ground? Because it seems like it's either the system we have in place now, which, as we all know, is clearly not working. And then there's the other side, which is socialism, which isn't going to work. How do we explain to people that there's a middle part? Because I think a lot of the reason why children nowadays are navigating towards socialism is that they've watched grandma and grandpa not be able to buy a house. Mom and dad can't buy a house. I can't buy a house. Everybody's working 6 jobs. And at the end of the day, everything is expensive. So people look at this stuff and they go, well, let's try socialism. How do we explain to people that there's got to be a middle ground, and how exactly do we get there?
Well, how about we start by explaining the realities of socialism in communist countries? How about we start, instead of sugarcoating this crap continuously, how about we bring the reality of that? Listen, in the J6 community, we have a number of people who are naturalized U.S. citizens who fled communist countries, including a number of Chinese Americans who are just amazing MAGA people. They know what it's like. Well, how about we try educating them in a system that brings reality of these comparative things, like problems of American democracy did. For gosh sake, such an easy thing to do, included in the curriculum, so there's a fair appraisal of the two systems. What they hear about socialism is, no, you get free rent. Oh, everybody gets free food stamps. Oh, everybody goes to college for free. Nobody has to pay for anything. Have you ever heard of a pyramid scheme where the guy at the bottom pays for everything at the top and he jumps off with all the money? That is what socialism is. It eventually degrades into an oligarchy where the rich and the elite are at the top and everybody else does exactly what they say and they have no say in the matter. And those who speak out are squashed like January 6ers. And that is the scary part, because that's how close to socialism we came, is that we were willing to use the functions of the government as blunt weapons against American patriots. And so I think, I won't lie to you, I wrote the books for this reason. The very reason I wanted to make these books was that putting these letters on Telegram and typing about it on a keyboard, it felt like whining, not winning. We needed to do something permanent. We needed to allow America, you don't want to listen to me. How about I let you listen to the guy behind the jail cell? How about I let you listen to his wife and children? How about I bring a little reality into your life? That's what the books do. The books bring that reality crashing into your sense of indolence as Americans. That's what they're about. That's why there's 3 of them, is I tell the whole freaking story. And in the last book, I show you these incredible people who were just like you and me. And in fact, I'm just one of them, just an ordinary American. I was in retirement playing golf. And then the election happened, and then Jan 6 happened, and I became a patriot. Well, I was always a patriot, I guess. I just never got activated. And when something important enough, like your children's future, gets in the game, you can get activated pretty easily. And the books are meant to do that. In the last book, I show you these individuals who became activated and became the core of the January 6th advocacy, who wrote the Pardon Project, who stood outside the prisons and rescued these people, who are rebuilding their lives in the J6 Road Home program, and who are preserving the truth in the J6 Archive Project, and who will bring those testimonies to you the way the January 6th committee is scared to do in the J6 Historical Panel of Inquiry, whose first session starts in 45 minutes.
So James, I would like to add to that.
Yes, go,
I
my
I
man, go.
I think, I personally think that I agree with what Tim is saying, but I would like to add a different dimension. You can't teach about communism and socialism until and capitalism and the American way until you teach the history of our country. People
Agreed.
have to understand where we came from, whether we're immigrants or not. We're not teaching the history of America. If we build a foundation underneath the next generation of children about America, its greatness and its flaws, but how it came to be formed, how it's operated, and how it's adjusted to the needs of the citizens over the 250 years, we then create a basis by which we can talk about attacks against that, whether it be communism, socialism, whatever. But we don't have, we build a house on sand because we don't have a solid foundation of understanding the Constitution, what the founding fathers were trying to do when they established the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and how it's a living document that's been modified over the 250 years to reflect what's going on in our country. We don't teach that anymore.
Nope.
And so I would like us to be able to compare and contrast socialism, communism, and capitalism, but I think we need a better foundation for who we are as Americans and where we came from and what we stand for as a country to educate our children, because they haven't been educated for a long time into America the greatest.
And look what they've been erasing. I mean, look at our past. You know, listen, I don't care if you don't like what happened during the Civil War. It's history and there are lessons there. So what do you want to do? You want to take the lessons down and destroy them? You want to make that memory go away so we repeat the mistakes of past? No, I agree with you. And it's why the book is important. It's why the archives are important. It's why this historical panel of inquiry is important. We need to preserve the true records, because so much can be easily erased, redacted, and rewritten, as we well know. Like you said, we don't know the true history of America. Why? Because the winners wrote it, not the losers.
Right.
IQ, you have been very silent, my friend.
Because I'm learning. But listen, there should be a rule by the government today, United States government, by Trump, that the Constitution of the United States of America and the history of America should be taught in every single school in the United States of America, bar none. Nobody will be excluded. It has to be taught from the very beginning of their education. And we wait and see. It's got to be mandated. It's got to be mandated. That's it.
Yeah, it was called civics, and you had to take it or you couldn't graduate from grade school.
Fine, so put it back again. Implement it again. It's got to be civics.
Yes.
Because most, as you said, most of these people never spent a dime in time, not even a second, to find out what the history is all about. People don't do that. People are, as you said, indolent, stupid. They listen, they think it sounds good, and they follow that sound.
When I was in the 50s, when I was in elementary school, we had American history was a subject matter.
Yep.
Classes on American history, our country, and you learned a lot about and I was for almost 18 years a merit badge counselor for the Boy Scouts of America for Eagle Merit Badges, and I chose to use the founding documents, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and as part of one of the merit badges that I was doing, community service. And so, but I always found that a lot of young men didn't know a lot about the history of our country, and I love history. I love to study the history of the Civil War. In fact, I've got a new novel coming out soon that is on the Civil War. Uh, we if we don't understand where we came from, then how are we going to know where we're supposed to go? That's what history does for us.
I think that's the importance of preserving. Unfortunately, I see January 6th as a momentous moment in contemporary American history. And not just January 6th, but the theft of the election, the locking down of America, the lies, the deceptions, all of these things have taken place in a microcosm. And American Gulag Chronicles has really taken the role of historian. Yeah, we raised money from the books and we gave that money to J6ers. We sustained families, we sustained individuals, we helped get them out of jail, we helped move them around the country and get them home. Yeah, that was all good stuff that was done with the money from the books. But in the end, the real purpose of the books is history. The real purpose of the archive project is history. The real purpose of the inquiry is history. We want to preserve the truth because that is history. I think you'll have to look 20 years in the future. Dan, you and I probably ain't gonna see it, brother. But who
No.
knows? Maybe we'll be heads in a jar somewhere. We'll watch it then. But I think that down the road, the next or the generation after the next will study this momentous time in history. These moments where we fled from the moral turpitude of the Constitution and embraced immoral acts and deception as the way of politics and justified it as such. This is a moment for reflection that future generations may learn from. And if we let them tear down the statues, if we let them erase the monuments, if we let them destroy the documents, there will be no reflection. There will be no acknowledgement. And the future can be aimless and lost. So yes, history is very important.
How can a country survive longer term when, as its public policy, they killed 65 million of their children?
Yep.
Consciously made the decision to kill 65 million children, the next generation or more. That's the one of the moral dilemmas, because if we say it's all right to kill children, then we have to begin to think about what else are we corrupt in our moral judgment.
I am a ULC minister, but I don't preach a lot. That's not my calling. My calling is more service. And I often reflect on what has happened to the American soul, not the spirit, but the soul. Have we turned away from our Judeo-Christian backgrounds and become so polyglot that we can no longer appreciate the majesty that has placed us here, or our responsibilities to be adequate representatives of that power? Is there no longer a sense of morality, of purpose, even though it's enshrined in our documents and our founding ideals, that people are willing to follow? You're right. We got to start back at the beginning. We need to take the next generations as they come through grade schools. We need to restore civics. We need to restore history, true history, in all its ugliness, all of it, because it's all lessons, every single one of them, the good and the bad. And maybe the next generations will save the Republic again. But I feel that we are not out of threat, that so many people have breathed this long exhaling sigh and go, boy, that was close. You got no idea. It is so close. It is still at your left ear. The wolf is at liberty's door always. That is why the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance, not temporary. And like I said, I think we boomers dropped the ball.
Tim, correct me if I'm wrong. Not a single person who was convicted at J6 of insurrection. Am I right? Not
That's
a single
correct.
one.
No
But
one,
this should be
nobody.
number one. This should be number one in the book. Not a single one was convicted of insurrection, although the media and the politicians spoke of insurrection.
IQ, I really hope you'll find the books, and I'd be more than happy to autograph one for you, because I didn't write them. The J6ers wrote them. They talk about what you're saying. They tell you that they were not insurrectionists, that they were not convicted nor charged. All of these letters in these books, which is really the majority of what the books are, the letters tell the story in first person, in unrefutable, vetted testimony. And so I think that's an important point, that the government overreach here, and that's what we hope to reveal in the panels of inquiry as we invite January 6ers. I've got a document here in front of me for 2 that will be on tonight's hearings, who will testify to the neglect and the medical abuse within the BOP, which actually saw them witness deaths while guards stood and watched, from medical neglect and from medical conditions that went untreated. And the stories are horrific. And you and I are complicit because it's our dollars that pays for this. And we've allowed it to happen, and we don't even care. We don't even look closely. So I think that's, again, the job of history, is to reveal those things and to make them permanent so that their lessons are not forgotten. We've just scratched the surface. We don't have near enough time to talk about what's happening with the BOP and the DOJ and the amount of traitorous and treasonous activity that's taken place over the last maybe as much as 10 years, but certainly in the last 4 years. So I just urge you, these books are very important. When you buy the books, you'll also be helping January 6ers. You'll be part of the Gulag army that's trying to help these people get their lives back, their reputations, their families, their homes, everything. They've lost it all. For what? For our liberty, for pointing out that this government was willing to do anything to seize power and hold it.
Right.
And that woke America up, so that in November we turn that tide. Will we turn it in the next November election? Will the midterms see us control Congress or lose it? I don't know.
Tim, are these books available in audiobook?
They're not, because it's very hard. I actually tried to think, could I get the original writers to actually do their own letters? And it would be an amazing undertaking. Some of these books have over 100 and something letters in them. But I think what you'll see is that they are available on Kindle in digital form, but when the 3rd book finally hits, you'll be able to get the entire package of all 3 books with some very special gifts that go with it that are commemoratives of January 6th, because I don't think people should forget the price of all of this, what was really lost, not just in human lives, and because we had many deaths, not just in human lives on J6, but the suicides, the 11 people who died from suicide afterwards. Matthew Huddle, who tried to take his own life but was killed by a police officer because he was released and trying to drive home in a car without a license after being released from prison. These are horror stories that nobody will tell you about. And so they're preserved in the books. When you buy the books, you're preserving the stories. You're preserving history. Read them to your children. Find the parts where you cry and don't read those.
So, Dan, as we wrap up here, how do we get in touch with you online and everything else?
DanPerkinsMedia.org is my television and radio show syndication. The radio show is also on AM/FM 24/7. My nonprofit is Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us. And you can also get me on Rumble and on Your News. And I'm continuing to work on the memoirs, and it's an amazing book for this gentleman.
So, IQ, how do we get your books, my friend?
On Amazon, Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. It was a fantastic show today. And Tim, I wish you the very best. I'm going to order the books when you have all 3 of them.
Awesome. Very good. I think you'll enjoy what they have to say.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
I'm sure
the books
I
are
will.
available at lettersfromprison.us.
Fantastic.
No problem.
Well, Tim, you are amazing. IQ, Dan, thank you guys. And we will
Thank
talk
you.
to everybody next week.
See you.
See ya.